Musa departed, making his way towards Mount Dur. The journey ahead was solitary and sacred. For 30 days, he would fast and seek communion with Allah, knowing that what awaited him at the end of this seclusion would be more than just guidance. It would be a covenant, a divine set of teachings to shape the future of his people. After the miraculous crossing of the Red Sea, the children of Israel found themselves wandering through a vast, unforgiving desert. The sun blazed mercilessly overhead, and the dry earth beneath their feet seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. There was no shade, no shelter, and worst of all, their water had long run out. They rested within a valley whilst Musa took rest on a nearby rock. A number of his people came to him, pleading him to ask Allah for help. "We need water. Help us, or we will perish." Musa, calm in the face of their desperation, lifted his hands in prayer, seeking guidance from Allah. In response, Allah spoke to Musa, instructing him to strike the rock beside him with his staff. Musa raised his staff and struck the rock. To everyone's astonishment, the lifeless stone suddenly burst to life. From the rock, not one, but 12 springs of fresh, clean water gushed forth. Each stream flowed with abundance, and as the water shimmered in the desert sunlight, the people marveled at the miracle before their eyes, their thirst quenched, grateful for the miracle. Yet they were unaware that this was just the beginning of their journey and their tests that Allah had ordained for them. After their thirst was quenched by the miraculous springs, the children of Israel set out once more on their journey through the desert. As they traveled further throughout the barren land, the heat became unbearable. The scorching sun beat down on them relentlessly, turning the sand into a furnace beneath their feet. Soon, the people began to grumble again. The harsh desert sun was too much. "It's too hot," they complained, their voices rising in frustration. "How long must we suffer under this burning sun?" Once more they turned to Musa, their leader and prophet, hoping for relief. Musa, with patience and unwavering faith, bowed his head and prayed to Allah for help. And then, just as before, the answer came from above. From the empty sky, clouds began to gather, soft, gentle, and cool. These were not like the clouds of storms or rain. They were clouds of mercy, sent by Allah to protect His people. They floated overhead, creating a vast canopy that shielded the children of Israel from the harsh rays of the sun. The people looked up in wonder as the clouds stretched across the sky, shading them and bringing a coolness that was unimaginable in the heart of the desert. As they walked, the clouds followed them, moving with them step by step. It was as though the very heavens had descended to shield them from the heat. With this new blessing, the people walked on, their complaints faded into silence. They were awed by the power and mercy of Allah, who had once again answered their needs in the most miraculous way. Yet deep down, they knew the desert still held many more challenges. But with every step, Musa reminded his people that Allah's help was always near, even in the most desolate places, as long as they remained faithful and grateful. Despite the cooling clouds that shaded them from the scorching sun and the springs of water that had flowed from the rock, the children of Israel soon found themselves facing yet another hardship: hunger. The barren desert offered little in the way of food, and as their journey stretched on, the people grew weary and weak from lack of nourishment. Grumbling once again, they turned to Musa. "We are starving," they cried. "What good is the shade and water if we have no food to eat? Pray to Allah for us." Musa, ever the patient leader, lifted his hands in prayer. He asked Allah to provide sustenance for his people, knowing that the same power that brought water from a rock and clouds from an empty sky could surely bring them food. The next morning, when the people awoke, they found something strange. A dewy substance clung to the leaves and the desert floor. It was soft, like freshly baked bread, and when they tasted it, they found it was sweet, almost like honey. This heavenly food was called manna, and was unlike anything they had ever known. But that was not all. As the day went on, flocks of quail appeared, freely walking amongst the people. The birds seemed almost to offer themselves, making it easy for the children of Israel to catch them without any effort. They could cook the quail and eat the meat along the sweet manna. At first, the people were overjoyed. Their hunger was gone, and once again Allah had provided for them in the most miraculous way. But as the days passed, gratitude began to fade. Greed crept into their hearts. Rather than trusting in the daily provision from Allah, they started to gather more than they needed. They stored away the manna and the quail, hoarding it, out of fear that there might not be enough in the days to come. Musa saw this and warned them, "Do not store the food. Allah will provide enough for each of us every day. You must trust in His mercy." But the people did not listen. They continued to hoard, piling up food beyond what was necessary. As Musa had warned, the food they stored quickly began to spoil. The manna lost its sweetness, turning stale and bitter. The quail, once tender and fresh, became tasteless. The people's greed had caused the very blessings they had been given to turn to waste. Still, Allah continued to provide, day after day, sending fresh manna and quail, reminding the people that His mercy was boundless. But with each passing day, it became clear that the greatest challenge of the desert was not the hunger, thirst, or heat. It was learning to be grateful, content, and faithful to the one who never stopped providing for them. Despite the provision of manna and quail, the children of Israel once again grew restless. Their gratitude, for which had already begun to wane, now turned into outright complaints. "We are tired of eating the same food every day," they grumbled, gathering around Musa. "We want the best of what the earth has to offer: cucumbers, lentils, beans and onions. Ask Allah to give us variety." Musa, saddened and frustrated by their lack of appreciation, looked at his people with disbelief. "Do you want to exchange the food that Allah Himself is providing for you in this desolate land for something as simple as what you desire? What is wrong with you?" Shaking his head, Musa gave them his advice. "There is a town nearby. If it is variety you seek, go to that town and you will find what you want. But know this: when you enter, do so humbly. Walk through the gates with your heads bowed, asking Allah for forgiveness." The people, however, had become stubborn. Instead of heeding Musa's words, they arrived at the gates of the town and decided to mock his instructions. Rather than entering with their heads bowed in respect, they turned their backs and walked in, laughing at the very idea of humbling themselves before Allah. But their mocking did not go unnoticed. As soon as they disrespected the sacred command, the skies above rumbled with a sudden and terrifying sound. A flash of light tore through the heavens, and without warning, a powerful thunderbolt struck down from the sky. It hit next to the people who were mocking where they stood, leaving them frozen in terror. In that moment, the people came to their senses. The laughter and arrogance that had filled their hearts turned to fear and regret. Musa watched from afar. His heart was broken. His people had been given so much, yet they continued to fail in their tests. Sometime after the events at the town, the children of Israel came to Musa and said, "You have been preaching to us that Allah will send us guidance, a way of life, a clear path that we are to follow. Where is it? How are we to know what Allah wants from us?" Musa listened carefully, understanding the need for clear direction for his people, who had often strayed without guidance. He turned to Allah in prayer, seeking an answer. In response, Allah spoke to him and instructed him to go to Mount Dur alone and to seclude himself from his people. There he was to fast for 30 days, after which Allah would give him the instructions to deliver to his people. Musa filled with reverence and a sense of duty, prepared for the journey. Before leaving, he called upon his brother Harun and told him of his instructions. During Musa's absence, Harun would be in charge of the people. Musa advised him to deal with their matters justly and wisely, and that if any among them began to corrupt themselves or others, he was to ensure that they are brought back to the right path. Harun nodded, understanding the responsibility placed upon him. Musa then addressed his people, explaining his mission. I am going to Mount Dur for 30 nights, as Allah has commanded me. I will be fasting and seeking the guidance that you have asked for. During my absence, Harun will lead you. Respect his judgment and do not fall into mischief. Allah is always watching. The people listened, but there was a restlessness in the air. Some were hopeful, believing that this journey would bring them the divine laws and teachings that they had long awaited. Others, however, were uneasy, their hearts still plagued by doubt and impatience. With his instructions given, Musa departed from his way to Mount Dur. The journey ahead was solitary and sacred. For 30 days he would fast and seek communion with Allah, knowing that what awaited him at the end of this seclusion would be more than just guidance. It would be a covenant, a divine set of teachings to shape the future of his people. While Musa was away at Mount Dur, fasting and awaiting the divine message from Allah, a man named Samri began to rise in influence amongst the children of Israel. Samri was a cunning man, quick with his words, loud and charismatic, the kind of person who could easily draw attention in a crowd. He had always felt he deserved a high position amongst the people, though Musa and Harun never acknowledged him in such a way. Taking advantage of Musa's absence, Samri saw an opportunity to push himself into a position of authority. He started to gather people around him, using his charm and wit to win them over. At first, it was subtle. He made jokes, lifted their spirits, and acted as though he was simply trying to help. But soon, his intentions became clear. He began to speak louder, urging the people to listen to him instead of Harun. As the 30th day passed, Samri announced, "Why are we still waiting? Musa has been gone 30 days. What if he's not coming back? Perhaps he's gone to his Lord for good. Maybe it's time we stop waiting for him and start listening to someone else who's still here with us." His words were laced with ambition as he sought to sway the people into doubting Musa's return. Harun, who had been entrusted with leading the people in Musa's absence, became aware of Samri's influence. He confronted him, determined to stop his rebellion before it spread further. "What are you doing? You know very well that Musa has gone to seek guidance from Allah. He will return when his time is complete. Why are you stirring unrest amongst the people?" But Samri was quick to defend himself. With a sly smile, he shrugged and said, "Musa's been gone for so long, Harun. You yourself said he would be away for 30 days, but now it seems he's not coming back at all. The people are restless. Someone needs to step up and lead them, and why shouldn't it be me?" Harun's eyes narrowed as he listened to Samri's words. He knew this man was trying to sow doubt and confusion amongst the people. "Musa will return," Harun insisted. "He is with Allah, receiving the guidance we need. Do not let impatience lead you into mischief." But even as Harun spoke, the seeds of doubt had already taken root in the hearts of some. They remembered that Musa had said he would be gone for 30 days, yet now those days had passed, and he had not returned. What they didn't know was that Allah in His wisdom had extended Musa's fast by an additional 10 days. Musa, unaware of this change at first, remained in deep seclusion, awaiting further instruction. In the meantime, Samri continued to spread his influence. He spoke to the people in secret, gathering those who were weak in faith, whispering in their ears that perhaps Musa had abandoned them, or worse, that he had perished on the mountain. Though Harun did his best to remind the people of their duty to remain patient and faithful, Samri's words began to sway more and more of them. He appealed to their desires, their fears, and their impatience, all the while positioning himself as the new leader. A leader who would not leave them waiting in the wilderness. Gathering a crowd around him, Samri stood tall, his voice loud and convincing. "Musa is not coming back," he declared. His words shocked the people who were already growing anxious. "And do you know why? It is because of you," his eyes scanning the confused faces around him. The people looked at each other, puzzled. "What do you mean?" they asked. Samri smiled and said, "When we left Egypt, many of you took gold from the treasures of Pharaoh. This gold is cursed. It has brought bad fortune upon us, and that is why Musa has not returned. It is your sin that keeps him away." Panic spread amongst the people. They remembered the gold they had taken. Now, hearing Samri's words, they feared that this gold was indeed the cause of their suffering. "What must we do?" they pleaded, desperate for a solution. Samri, prepared with an answer, said, "Bring me all your gold. I will light a great fire, and we will throw the gold into it. Once it is destroyed, the curse will be lifted, and we will no longer be burdened by it." Without hesitation, the people obeyed. They gathered their gold rings, bracelets, necklaces, and all the riches they had brought with them from Egypt, and handed it over to Samri. He lit a large fire and threw the gold into the flames. Samri had a plan of his own. He was not merely ridding the people of their gold. Being a skilled craftsman, he secretly began to mold the melted metal into something far more dangerous. As the people waited, Samri shaped the gold into the form of a calf, a creature often worshipped in the lands of Egypt. He carefully designed it so that it had a hole at the front and the back, allowing air to pass through and create a ringing sound. When the calf was finished, it gleamed with a golden light, an idol crafted from the very treasures that had once been used to escape Pharaoh's tyranny. Samri gathered the people around once more. With a glint of triumph in his eyes, he said, "Behold, this is the God of Musa, covered in gold. This is what you must worship." The people stared in awe at the shining figure. Their weak faith clouded their judgment. Then, as the wind passed through the hole Samri had created, the calf emitted a strange ringing sound, as if it were alive. Samri seized the moment. "Look, it speaks to you," he exclaimed. "Bow down before it and prostrate, for this is your God now." Some of the people, confused and desperate for something to hold on to, they did as Samri commanded. They bowed down before the golden calf, believing that this man-made idol was a source of divine power. The ringing sound it made as the wind passed through only fueled their superstition. Harun watched in horror. He had been trying to keep the people in line, reminding them of Musa's teachings and urging them to remain patient. But now they had fallen into open rebellion, worshipping a lifeless idol of gold. Desperation filled Harun's heart as he stepped forward to confront them. "O people, what have you done?" he cried out, his voice filled with grief. "This is not the way. You must repent back and turn to Allah. Do not be deceived by Samri and this golden calf. Follow me, for I am your rightful leader in Musa's absence. This idol has no power, only Allah does." But many of the people, still under Samri's influence, shook their heads. "We cannot," they said, their voices filled with uncertainty and guilt. "We have wronged ourselves by taking the gold from Pharaoh. This is our punishment. Samri has shown us the way. We will continue worshipping here until Musa returns." Harun's heart sank as he realized how deeply Samri's lies had taken root. "No," he insisted, "you have been misled. This calf is not your God, nor is it a punishment from Allah. Repent now before Musa returns, and perhaps you will be forgiven for this grave sin." While some of the children of Israel fell into corruption under Samri's deception, Musa was still on Mount Tur, preparing for his meeting with Allah. After 40 days of fasting and seclusion, the moment had come for Musa to receive the divine message that would guide his people. In a sacred conversation, Musa spoke with Allah. As the awe and majesty of this encounter filled his heart, Musa asked for something more, a request born of his deep longing to know Allah even more intimately. "My Lord, let me see you," he pleaded. Allah in his infinite wisdom responded, "You will never be able to see me in your earthly being." But Musa persisted in his desire, asking again, eager to experience Allah's presence. Allah in response said, "Look at that mountain. If it can withstand my presence, then you shall see me." Musa turned his gaze towards the towering mountain before him, watching with anticipation. Then, Allah revealed just a glimpse of His awe-inspiring nature to the mountain. In an instant, the entire mountain began to shake violently. The rocks crumbled and the mighty structure turned to dust, reduced to ashes by the sheer power of Allah's revelation. At that moment, the force of what Musa witnessed overwhelmed him, and he fell to the ground, unconscious. Time seemed to stand still as Musa lay there, unaware of how long he had remained in this state. When he finally awoke, his heart was filled with awe and humility. "Glory be to you, Allah," Musa exclaimed. "You are so pure and perfect. I ask for your forgiveness. I now realize the limits of my human nature." Allah, pleased with Musa's humility, said, "O Musa, I have chosen you above all people to deliver my message and to speak with me directly. Take what I am giving you now and be amongst those who give gratitude." And then Allah gave Musa His commandments, which was carved in stone. These commandments were the divine laws, the guidance the children of Israel had long sought, and they would be a light for them if they remained faithful. But just as Musa received this great blessing, Allah revealed something troubling. "Musa, while you have been secluded for these 40 days, I have been testing your people. They have been led astray by Samri." Musa's heart sank. After all the miracles they had witnessed, his people had fallen into disobedience once again. Anger and regret surged through him. With the commandments in his hand and a heavy heart, Musa hurried down the mountain. He was filled with both urgency and fury. As he approached his people, Musa's voice thundered with a righteous anger. "O my people, has your Lord not given you a good promise? Has time gone by so long that you have forgotten everything? Why would you do this? Do you want Allah's wrath to descend upon you for your disobedience?" His face was stern and his eyes burned with disappointment. The people, now filled with guilt and fear, tried to defend themselves. "We didn't mean to disobey you, O Musa," they cried out. "It was Samri who led us astray. He told us you were not coming back. He convinced us that we were cursed because of the gold we took from Pharaoh, and he made us worship this calf." When Musa heard the people blame Samri for leading them astray, his frustration and bewilderment turned towards his brother, Harun. He approached Harun with anger, grabbing him by his beard and hair, demanding answers. "What is this, Harun? How could you let this happen?" Harun, caught in the moment, looked at his brother. "Oh, my brother," he said softly. "Please, don't humiliate me in front of the people. They are watching us right now. You must understand, I tried to stop them, but they saw me as weak, and when I confronted them, they threatened to kill me." Harun continued, "I saw that if I pushed harder, it would have caused more division and fighting amongst them, so I waited for your return, knowing that together we could address this and restore order." Hearing Harun's explanation, Musa's anger began to subside. He realized the difficult position his brother had been in, and how he tried to preserve what little unity remained amongst the people. His heart softened and he looked to the sky, seeking forgiveness for both himself and his brother. "O Allah, forgive me and my brother Harun," he prayed earnestly, knowing that the situation had spiraled out of control in his absence. With a deep breath, Musa turned his attention to Samri, the man who had caused all this chaos. His eyes narrowed as he confronted him. "And you, Samri, why would you do this? What led you to deceive the people and make them worship this golden calf?" Samri, now facing the weight of his actions, tried to explain himself. "I saw something that others did not," he began, his voice shaky but still trying to justify his actions. "I had a vision of something beyond what the people could see. I thought I was doing something great, something that would benefit them. So I took some of the gold, melted it, and created the calf, thinking it would give them something tangible to believe in whilst you were gone." Musa listened, but his patience was running thin. Samri's arrogance and misguided self-righteousness had caused great harm, and it was clear that he had no true remorse for his actions. Musa spoke firmly, declaring Samri's punishment. "Your punishment is that you shall live as an outcast. You will wander alone for the rest of your life, and whenever someone touches you, you will feel unbearable pain. This will be your reminder of the harm you have caused." Samri was struck by the severity of his punishment, doomed to a life of solitude and suffering. With Samri dealt with, Musa turned to the golden calf, the idol that had caused the people's faith to waver. He knew this symbol of their disobedience needed to be destroyed. He ordered the calf to be burned, and once the gold had melted into a molten mass, he had it thrown into the sea, ensuring that no trace of the idol remained. The people watched in silence, their heads lowered in shame, as the calf was destroyed. Musa's actions sent a clear message. Their Lord was the only one worthy of worship, and the golden calf, like all false gods, was nothing but a creation of their own weakness. The consequences of their actions could not be swept away so easily. There had to be a reckoning, not only to restore order, but to purify the community from the corruption that had taken root. Musa gathered the people, and his gaze swept over them, separating those who had remained steadfast in their faith from those who had worshipped the calf. The ones who had not participated in the idolatry stood on one side, while those who had bowed to the golden calf stood on the other, trembling in shame and fear. Musa then turned to the faithful and said, "Allah commands that there must be a purification amongst you. This sin must be atoned for, and the only way to cleanse this community is through sacrifice. Draw out your swords and carry out the punishment upon those who have worshipped the calf." The command struck the people with shock and sorrow. The faithful knew that they had to obey, but their hearts were heavy. These were their friends, family members, and neighbors, people they had lived with and loved. But Musa's words carried the weight of divine instruction, and they knew that Allah's justice had to be fulfilled. The faithful drew their swords and approached those who had committed the sin. Those who had worshipped the calf accepted their fate, understanding that their actions had led them to this point. Some fell to their knees, heads bowed in repentance, while others wept openly, knowing that their betrayal of Allah had brought them here. And so, with heavy hearts, the faithful carried out the judgment. It was a grim and sorrowful scene, the sound of swords cutting through the silence. Brothers, fathers and sons were struck down, and their blood stained the ground. This act was not done out of hatred or vengeance, but out of obedience to Allah's command, a necessary act to restore the purity of the community. After the punishment was completed, Allah revealed to Musa that those who had died as a result of this purification would be forgiven and accepted into His mercy. Their deaths, though tragic, had cleansed them of their sin, and they would not be condemned in the hereafter. This brought solace to the community, though the pain of loss still lingered in their hearts. Musa gathered the people once more. He stood before them holding the tablets that contained the divine commandments, and revealed what had been given to him by Allah. The words were clear, but even after all they had been through, some among the people still harbored doubt in their hearts. They turned to Musa and said, "O Musa, we have heard what you have told us, but how can we completely believe this without hearing Allah ourselves? We want to experience what you have experienced, to hear His voice with our own ears." Musa, though saddened by their continued hesitation, chose 70 of their elders, respected men from each tribe, and said, "Come with me to Mount Dur. You will witness for yourselves the truth that you seek." The group of 70 men followed Musa up the mountain. As they reached the sacred place, Musa prayed to Allah, asking for a sign for his people. Allah in His infinite mercy responded to Musa's plea. The sky grew still, and then, in a moment of divine grace, Allah spoke directly to the 70 men. His voice filled the air, a voice unlike any sound on earth, full of majesty and power. The 70 men heard it and trembled, feeling the weight of the experience. However, Even after hearing the voice of their creator, they said, "We do not know who you are. We want to see you with our own eyes." Their demand was bold. At that moment, a thunderbolt from the heavens descended with a terrifying force, striking the 70 men all at once. They collapsed to the ground, lifeless. Musa stood there, the only survivor, watching in shock as the men lay still at his feet. Fear and worry gripped Musa's heart. He thought to himself, "How will I return to the people now? When they ask me what happened to these men, how can I explain their deaths? Will they question my authority even more? Will they accuse me of leading them astray?" The weight of responsibility was almost unbearable. In desperation, Musa fell to the ground in prayer, pleading with Allah. "O Allah, you have taken these men before my eyes, but if I return without them, my people will question everything. They will doubt my words. They will doubt you. Please, O Allah, guide me and help me through this trial." In His mercy, Allah listened to Musa's heartfelt plea. The sky calmed, and slowly Allah returned life to those bodies of the 70 men. They began to stir, their souls restored. Musa, overwhelmed with gratitude, watched as they rose, now witnesses not only to the voice of Allah, but also to the power of His mercy and judgment. The men, having experienced death and resurrection by Allah's will, were deeply humbled. They no longer doubted Musa's words or Allah's greatness. They followed Musa down the mountain, shaken but filled with a newfound faith. When they returned to the people, the 70 elders stood before the children of Israel and told them everything that had happened. After some time, the children of Israel began to understand how to live according to the guidance revealed to them. The memory of their earlier disobedience still lingered, but they had learned hard lessons and were now trying to follow the commandments of Allah as best they could. Life among them settled into a rhythm of worship, law, and learning. One day, a group of people came to Musa with a serious problem. "O Musa," they said, "a murder has taken place among us, and we do not know who the killer is. We seek justice, but we cannot find the one responsible. We know that you have a direct link to Allah, so please ask Him to reveal who committed this terrible crime." Musa listened carefully, and then he prayed to Allah for guidance. But instead of telling Musa who the murderer was, Allah gave an unexpected command: "Tell the people to slaughter a cow." When Musa conveyed this to the people, they were confused. "Why should we slaughter a cow?" they asked. "How will that help us find who the killer is? You could just ask Allah to tell us directly who did it." Musa, patient as ever, explained that this was Allah's command, even if they did not fully understand the wisdom behind it. But the people were not satisfied with this simple instruction. They began to ask more questions, seeking to delay or complicate the task. "O Musa," they said, "ask Allah what kind of cow it should be." Musa prayed again, and Allah responded, "It should be a cow that is neither too young nor too old, but in the prime of its life." The people were still not content. "What color should the cow be?" they asked. Musa, growing tired of their persistence, but still dutiful, prayed again. Allah responded, "It should be a bright golden yellow cow, one that mesmerizes those who see it." The people continued to hesitate, still not willing to act. They asked again, "O Musa, ask Allah to clarify further. What kind of cow exactly? We need more details." Musa prayed once more, and Allah responded, "The cow should be one that has never worked in the fields or plowed the land. It must be unblemished and without defect." At this point, Musa could sense the frustration in their questions. He realized that by asking for more and more clarification, they were making the task more difficult for themselves. Had they obeyed the original command without hesitation, they could have easily fulfilled Allah's request. But now, with all these details, finding the exact cow had become harder. The children of Israel set out in search of the cow that Allah had described. They traveled for days, wandering through the towns and countryside, asking around. Finding a cow that fit all their specific criteria was proving to be more difficult than they had imagined. Finally, after much effort, They had found a farmer who owned the perfect cow. The animal was exactly as Allah had described. Its golden yellow color shimmered in the sunlight, and it was clearly untouched by labor. Excited that their search had come to an end, the people approached the farmer and asked to buy the cow. But the farmer was not willing to sell. "This cow is not for sale," he said firmly. The people pleaded with him, offering more and more money, but the farmer refused each offer. Growing increasingly frustrated with their persistence, the farmer finally said, "If you really want this cow, weigh it in gold. Whatever the weight is, that will be its price." Shocked by the absurd demand, the people hesitated, but they had no other choice. They returned to their community, gathered as much gold as they could, and came back to the farmer. When they placed the gold before him, his eyes widened with surprise. The sheer amount of wealth overwhelmed him, and with a wide grin he handed over the cow without hesitation. The people returned to Musa, relieved that they had finally obtained the cow. Musa, seeing the cow fit all the criteria Allah had given, instructed them to slaughter it. Though the people had grumbled at the strange command, they did as Musa said. The cow was sacrificed. Musa then told them to cut off its tail. With the tail in hand, Musa directed them to strike the body of the murdered man with it. The people, still puzzled but obedient, followed Musa's instructions. As soon as the tail touched the lifeless body, a miracle occurred before their very eyes. The dead man stirred and suddenly sat up, alive once more. The crowd gasped in awe and disbelief. The resurrected man looked at the people gathered around him and spoke with a clear voice. "I was murdered by my own nephew. He killed me. He wanted to inherit my wealth before my time." With those words, the man collapsed again, returning to his death. The matter was now clear. The murderer had been revealed. The nephew, who had committed the crime in greed, was exposed before the entire community. Justice was swiftly carried out, and the people were humbled by the event. Musa, standing before the people, reminded them once again of the significance of the submission to Allah. Had you followed the command from the beginning, the task would have been easy, but you delayed with your questions, and in doing so made it difficult for yourselves. Let this be a lesson to trust in Allah's wisdom, for He knows what is best, even when we do not. After delivering justice and guiding His people through many trials, Allah revealed a new instruction to Musa, to lead the children of Israel to a holy and blessed land. This land was filled with history where many prophets and kings had lived before. It was a place that Allah had promised the children of Israel, known today as Jerusalem. With the promise of a new beginning, Musa gathered his people and set out towards this sacred land. Upon reaching the borders, Musa addressed his people with a heartfelt speech, reminding them of Allah's blessings and guidance. He reminded them that Allah had saved them from the tyranny of Pharaoh, parted the sea for them, provided them food and water in the desert, and given them laws to live by. Now, they stood on the brink of entering a land that had been promised to them, a land of great blessing. Musa, following Allah's command, chose 12 men, one from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, to scout the city and report back what they had found. The men entered the city quietly, observing its people, streets, and surroundings. When the 12 returned, 10 of them looked frightened and anxious. They reported to Musa, saying, "The city is filled with great men of great size, giants who are tyrants. We cannot overcome them. They are too strong, too powerful for us. We should wait until they leave the city of their own accord, and then only we can enter." The people hearing this were filled with fear. Doubts began to creep into their hearts, and their faith wavered once again. But 2 out of the 12, men of deep faith and courage, stood up and objected. They said, "No, we should not be afraid. If we all enter the city together, as one united group, they will see our numbers and strength, and we will have the upper hand. We must have faith that Allah will protect us, for He has promised this land to us. Trust in Him, and He will grant us victory." However, the other 10 leaders continued to resist. They were consumed by fear and doubt, and they spread their fear amongst the people. They told Musa, "We will never enter that city as long as those giants remain inside. If you believe we should enter, then you and your Lord go and fight them. We will wait here." Musa was heartbroken by their response. After everything they had been through, escaping Pharaoh's tyranny, witnessing the parting of the sea, and receiving Allah's countless signs and guidance, his people still hesitated, refusing to trust Allah's promise. They stood just a stone throw away from the promised land, yet their stubbornness delayed what could have been their moment of triumph. In his distress, Musa turned to Allah in prayer. "O my Lord, I have no power over these people. Save my brother Harun and myself. Separate us from these rebellious ones, for they refuse to listen to your command." In response, Allah revealed to Musa that because of the stubbornness and lack of faith of his people, it was now prohibited for them to enter into this blessed land. Allah declared, "The land is forbidden for them for 40 years. They will wander the earth aimlessly. Do not grieve over those who disobey." Musa gathered his people and told them what had been decreed. Their disobedience had led to this consequence. They were to return to the desert, wandering in the wilderness, until a time that Allah had ordained. Salvation was so close, but their stubborn hearts had turned them away from it, and now they would all have to bear the weight of that choice.